welcome back to my tutorial series. This is episode 2 of 3 on bass lines. In episode 1 we looked at sound design and how to make a bass in both Massive and in Serum, and today we're going to be looking at processing and layering and just fattening that sound up that we had originally. So I'm going to be using the Massive sound, which is this. And first of all, we're going to add a sub to that sound. So I'm going to be using Serum for that very, very simple, very basic way of making a sub. This is the initialize patch. We're going to turn off oscillator A, turn on the sub, and just bring that down a bit. Turn it up slightly. And then add a filter. Switch on S for sub. And that is it. That's how you make a basic sub. That's on a sine wave, which is really good for bass sounds, sub bass sounds. And I'm now going to add that to a mixer channel. There we go. Next up, I'm going to be doing some processing on the Massive bass, which we had originally, which currently sounds like that. So I've muted the sub for now. First thing we're going to do on this sound is take away, so let's add an EQ and take away the bass. Oh, wrong channel. I'm going to take out the sub frequencies, which you don't need now because we have a sub bass. So kind of up to there. And just look for some frequencies that kind of bite, just to bring out some extra like harmonics in the sound. Kind of like that frequency there. Take out some high end. Obviously not every bass sound you make is necessarily going to need this type of EQ. But the reason I've taken out the sub is because once you start piling effects onto a sound, it can have an adverse effect on how the sub sounds. So I like to keep the sub quite kind of natural and raw, and when you're throwing effects onto the mid or top bass like we are now, you're leaving the sub kind of as it is without putting too much on it. And I quite often now take quite a bit of high end out of the bass just to let the percussion and leads and stuff come through when the whole track's playing. A lot of modern tracks now, we don't have this, like, unless it's like a really gritty tune, you just don't need it really. There we go. Next up, I'm going to add a saturator. This is a free one. It's really good for just kind of bringing the sounds together a little bit. So that's sounding pretty cool so far. I mean, I don't usually need to chuck loads of sounds on the bass because if you've got the right sound, you kind of don't need to. And I think sometimes less is more, definitely in music production anyway. Next up is I'm just going to put this effect on just for the sake of this tutorial because I really like this. It's just a simple Waveshape. If you've got FL Studio, then this bad boy comes with it. If you haven't, then there's loads of Waveshapers available to you. This one's really good because I like it. It's kind of really easy to use. It's visual as well. So you can see there the way you move it kind of determines the type of shape you're bringing into the sound. And finally, this bad boy, sausage fattener, which does exactly what it says on the tin. So we're going to leave that now, and we're going to work on the sub. I'll come back to the explaining that top bass in a sec. I just want to get them both sounding right together. So as I said, I keep the sub pretty natural and raw. Don't need this on. Just add some type of bit of overdrive just to make it punch a little bit. Modern dance tracks now they have so much sub bass, and you kind of want your track to stand the test against other tunes as well when you mix them in a club. And I quite often use a spectrum analyzer to help me judge how much of the sub is punching through. See there, like it's really good for. That's a free one as well from Vengeance, as far as I'm aware, so that's pretty cool. So I definitely suggest getting that. So yeah, just a subtle bit of overdrive, just to kind of make the sub punch that a little bit more. And before I add the top bass back in, I'm just going to play the kick and the sub together. Sounding cool. And then what I'll do finally is add those two to a bass group track. And then add some really light compression on. So I use OTT. This is another free one as well. Most of the stuff I'm using is free. Even though I've paid loads of money for really good plugins, I seem to always just go to the free plugins. And all that's doing is just kind of gluing the two basses together a little bit. It's not very harsh compression on it at all. It's really light, but it just helps to kind of bring the sounds together. So yeah, if I turn all those sounds off, all the effects off on the chain, you can hear that sounds much fatter in the mix. And I haven't piled that many effects on really. Sometimes after I've done those, I may occasionally add another EQ on after, and that's just to make sure none of the kind of sub sounds have come through. So again, I'll probably put that on after like that. And that's probably all I would do, is just put an EQ on after. But then you don't always need to do that. But yeah, there's also one other thing you can do actually, which is something I quite often do, and that's add in a layer of white noise. And I think that although it needs to be subtle, it can make a really good effect. That's kind of one I've just set up on Massive. That's literally, you just switch all the oscillators off, and then here bring the white noise kind of up to about 12, and then the amp around about 11, and you get a kind of like just a white noise sound, and that can just sit in with the other bass sounds. I notice hardstyle kicks kind of have this like almost some of them anyway have this kind of like white noise. It sounds like there's a white noise layer. So I started trying it on my bass lines, and yeah, it does work. It just fills it out a little bit more. So let's play the bass with that in. And get that. So yeah, it's really subtle. Well, I don't know if you can tell. If you've got headphones, you might be able to tell a little bit more. But yeah, for me, that really works as a kind of bass layer. But as I say, it's got to be subtle. It can't overpower the kind of other, like you wouldn't want it up here. So yeah, that's it really. So you don't, like I said, you don't need to pile tons of effects on to get a kind of gritty, nice, solid sounding bass. And you could just use a few of these tools here. I think Bar Pro Q and Sausage Fattener, which is about 30 quid, that's free. Fruity Waveshape is free. OTT is free. So yeah, And I mean, to be honest, for an EQ, you can just use the built-in FL1 or Ableton or Cubase, whichever one. They all do this same thing. So I know a few people probably ask why I haven't used stock FL plugins, but to be honest, I've got the tools at my disposal, and I want to show you how I do it, which is why I've chosen the plugins that I would go to when I'm making a bass sound. So I hope that's helped you guys today. The next tutorial, I'm going to be looking at different bass structures. So far, we've kind of worked just off this standard offbeat sounding bass, but I want to show you guys different types of bass lines, you know, to give different groove or a different vibe in a track, like the rolling bass, you know, a sidechained kind of electro style bass, triplet bass, things like that. So yeah, that will be coming in bass part 3, and then after that I'm going to be moving on to something completely different. So thank you for tuning in. I hope that's helped, and be sure to like and subscribe to stay up to date with future tutorials. Thank you very much. See you soon.